Good afternoon. My name is Lieutenant Gibson from CSR, 1CSR. This question's for Lieutenant Stannard. In regards to your research that you conducted, did that take into account authorised personnel? So the non-qualified junior commanders and sergeants, etc., that are able to run PT sessions? So people who haven't done the ADFFL course and aren't qualified in any way, apart from a brief at the start of the year. Did that research take those personnel into account?
Yeah, so the survey was categorical, meaning so there were a number of categories that people could pick from, and it was purposely like that to make it easy. There were a number of categories, things like PT, ADF sport, etc. If there wasn't a category that people wanted to pick, there was an other box, and people could narratively write text in there to give me that information. So I didn't ask them directly, but they had the opportunity to write that if it happened, and of which there were none. Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Second part also, with PTIs, would I be right in saying that PTIs would take less of the PT sessions than ADFFLs? I would say, at least in the unit I work at, ADFLs take more PT sessions. So when I think it was 38% of injuries were coming from ADFFLs and 35% from PTIs, but if PTIs are taking less sessions, would that factor into it as well?
Yeah, you're right. So day-to-day people are more exposed to ADFFL PT. I think I need to deep dive into the data a bit more. I think because a third of the injuries came from training establishments, and from my understanding, PTIs tend to take PT more in that environment. So I would suspect that perhaps more PTI-related injuries are coming from the training establishments.
I've just got a question. We talked a lot about, performance in service today, but I guess the inevitability of service that it will end one way or another for everybody. So I'm curious from the panel, any comments they wish to make about the human aspect of performance and transitioning out of service back into society and the important aspects of that.
The health and performance continuum, on one end you sort of have less than ideal function due to injury, illness or whatever it is, and on the other end you're at your optimal performance. I think in my experience coming from sport and into defence, I'm almost daily surprised at how much sport and defence are similar, but how strikingly different they are as well. But I suppose in terms of that transitional space, clearly health is one of those inputs, and there's quite a lot of services out there. We've heard from RSL today of what you can get involved with, and ensuring that at least that baseline health is as good as it can be after or during that transition. But I think the mental skills that you guys are all trained in will obviously be an asset in the civilian life as well. So I think you can apply it, but clearly you guys live in a certain context, and but nonetheless, I think the skills are transferable in my view.
I think we, from an athlete perspective, we look at their life cycle through sport, and then and then out of sport as well. So we follow a pathway. They're identified as talented, provide them with training as part of a high performance system. They progress through various categorizations of capability and performance at competition, emerging, developing, podium, potential podium ready, podium. And then there comes a time where over however many years, it's time to transition out, and that period can be short and it can be long, but it's about constantly checking in at regular intervals with what we call now our alumni, and also ensuring that there's some way of positively reconnecting with the sporting industry when they have transitioned out and retired, so that there's a long enduring positive engagement with sport. And so hopefully at some point in time, as you've seen, we've got the alumni program, there's a way in which they're ready to come back and share some of their knowledge and experience back with younger athletes, and I know that is always a positive way of reconnecting, but also that there are the services available to support their transition from a health perspective, mental health perspective, financial, career, and an educational perspective. So what was raised from RSL Queensland earlier today, they're wonderful resources. It's just tapping into them, and that support-seeking piece and connecting in with those services. There's still a barrier there, so we find that as well in sport. So we make a lot of services available, but actually knowing how and when and feeling comfortable to tap back into those services to support that transition, is still a really important area of us understanding how to do that really well. And I don't know if that's something also from a defence point of view that exists. One more part to that is it's hard to find something else you're as passionate about, and you're searching for that feeling. I'm so passionate about my sport, and training, competing at this level is all-consuming, and that there's so much about it that creates so much positive sort of engagement, and then you sort of hoping to find something that fulfills you like that, and it's actually not that easy to stumble across. And then there's all this choice, and then you get anxious about all the choice and making the wrong choice. So a lot of those kinds of cognitive and emotional patterns kick right back in. So it is a really difficult time, and periodising that transition over 1, 2, 3, 5 years is probably really important to think about as part of the life cycle.
Great, thanks you all very much for that contribution. I think to link into Army, if I may just briefly, and talk about that transition piece that we've just been talking about now. Of course, we're talking about transitioning in the sporting world, perhaps over a bit of time, and people have an appropriate time to reflect and prepare for that next stage. But of course in Army and other services as well, we have those members that are medically separating, and often that comes with a shortened timeline, and they don't have that opportunity to transition out over the timeline that they had first thought. So a quick plug for Soldier Recovery Centre. If you have members in your team that are medically separating, we do run an 8-week program for those members to help them prepare for a successful transition journey. And if you're based in Darwin, the Q4 program will start on the 17th of October, so just reach out to us.
Trying to understand if there's any research opportunities coming forward so that we can measure HPO inputs or strategies in the future.
I can answer from a health perspective. The 4Com people might want to answer that as well. I think fundamentally it comes down to the dimensions of performance. Performance is kind of the outcome, the thing that you're aiming for, and that can be measured in some contexts. So sport, win-loss, pretty simple, but it does get a little bit more complex. I think in a military setting, the winning and losing is sometimes a little bit harder to measure. But there is a heap of health research that we are kicking off, and amongst those 8 priorities there, we will be reaching out into the enterprise in the next couple of months to say, these are themes, they're not problems. What's happening in 1CR, and tell us. And so there'll be a bit of fact finding. So there'll be an opportunity there for people to lump in when it comes and tell us what your problems are in a way. Some of those will be performance-based things. Some of them will be down on that more welfare and end of that continuum that Joe showed us. So I'll be saying that. But maybe Em, if you want to talk performance, that would be great.
Yeah. Is this working? Yeah, I was going to try to avoid speaking again, but what I didn't get a chance to speak to earlier was managing human performance, because I wanted to not talk about it at an official level. But I don't know if any of you have heard about the Human Performance Management System that we've been talking about for a few years, and the concept behind that is we need, if we're going to do it, we need to manage it. But the complexity around, we've got to define it first, really, and probably in the different dimensions and the domains that we're talking about. So there's the ICT and, privacy security issues that we're having around, a database, if we're going to do it that way. Originally, we were talking about modelling it off an athlete management system, but the athlete management system is like their health records database that then has performance metrics as well. So we're working through those complexities, and it is a project, and probably the interim solution will be a dashboard that hopefully individuals and commanders can use. So commanders at various levels, the concept would be that they would be able to see aggregated data for their platoon or their unit or their brigade, and have an understanding of readiness over and above health metrics or injury metrics. But it's a pretty complex space to play in. So we're certainly working through that. And hopefully there'll be more communication out from HQ and Forcom soon about those things.
So HPO and Army, really exciting, developing stuff. There's a lot of initiatives coming out, and hopefully you've all heard a couple of things today that have resonated with you, maybe challenged some of your thoughts or beliefs around what's happening in that HP space. And I guess for the panel, for the junior leaders that are in the room, and they're thinking, I've got this great initiative that I really want to implement, but what's the first step that I could take in order to get something happening with that initiative? I'd like to hear from each of you in your experience and what you may have to offer for that.
I would always, really start with what you want to get out of that initiative. So in my area, I suppose we're in health research, so people come to us with good ideas. Some of those are good ideas, and some of those are the good idea fairy. But nonetheless, they're all ideas. So the ones that are more the good ideas is where someone comes to me and says, I have a problem. I think this is possibly why it's happening, and I want to get this type of outcome from it. So I think starting at the end point is really important. It's definitely what we did in Sportland. Definitely what I'm trying to do in defence now is what is the impact in military terms, I suppose. What's the capability you're trying to improve through doing that, and working back from that end point. There's I suppose a variety of things, in making sure that you go through your chain of command and all that as well. Interestingly, to get started, when I took this job, I spoke to some of the senior leadership from a variety of different parts down in Canberra, and one senior leader, I will not name them, said to me, Mick, we've hired you because we want change and we want to go after doing stuff. I said, well, how will this go? Because typically I am a rule breaker. That's what innovation and research is about looking at the rules and which ones do you follow, which ones do you try and improve on. And two things struck me was a saying that was told to me, which is the closer you are to the front of the bus, the more you realise that no one's driving. And I thought, oh, right. So if you're going to start driving, work out if you are a rebel or a troublemaker. We can tolerate the rebels, knowing and understanding the rules and the principle of the rule, and you'll probably find that defence supports those type of initiatives really well. But don't be a troublemaker. Don't just break the rules because you think you're being innovative. Know that by being that rebel, you're actually driving the bus, and you're going to end up somewhere better off. So that would be sort of my advice. By all means, go at it. Try not to piss people off on the way. Try and bring people with you would be my advice.
It's a really good question. I'm sitting here going, I'm not exactly sure what a junior leader is or how old they are or where they sit in the organisation, but I'm thinking of myself when I may have been junior, but I think I was always a bit of a leader. And so I guess if I'm putting myself back in time a little bit, it's really setting some clear goals of the experiences that I wanted, and they were very clear early. I want to be in elite sport, I want to be at the pointy end, and I want to immerse myself in that environment and be there to help that group of athletes and coaches achieve their goals. So that was always a strong thread. But then parallel to that, from purely a HPO space, be a good scientist, understand measurement, understand method, understand how to apply and implement it so that those athletes and coaches can absorb it in a way that can quickly translate into training and then into competition, and repeat that dose. So it's constantly, even at this age, I'm not that old, but I feel like I've been around a while. Even at this age, I'm coming back to there's a lot of literature out there, there's a lot of science out there, there's a lot of things being measured in psychology because everybody wants to try and understand it in some way, shape or form, but you've got to come back to the evidence and go, hang on, what's really here, what's reliable, what are we measuring, why are we measuring it, how are we measuring it, technology's changing, I've got to come back and start doing research again, let's collect some data. So I'm coming back to almost my PhD days and starting again because I've got to keep learning along the way so that when I'm with athletes and coaches, I'm really clear on what the evidence is. I'm really clear on what we need to observe in competition so that it's contextually relevant, and I've got some tools that can help them actually achieve what they need to achieve. So that cycle is just ongoing. So I think that's what I would suggest if I was going back and thinking about being a junior leader, is that learning loop is actually going to come back around again. And if you're not actually able to come back and relearn some things or go back and revisit some things, you're going to get generalist and never become a specialist with deep knowledge.
I guess my advice would be somewhat going similar to what Major Williams was chatting about earlier with going back to the basics. So I would recommend knowing the situation, so understand your team's strengths and weaknesses, understand the mission of what you're trying to achieve, tailor your training, consider the strengths and weaknesses, and plan it moving forward from there. And if you don't know, reach out for the SME advice.